for staying on. KwaZulu-Natal has highlighted, the KwaZulu-Natal judge has highlighted the adverse impact of DNA backlog and delays on the victims of gender-based violence and the administration of justice. This after a rape accused who was set free pending DNA tests went on to rape and murder a minor. Here to talk to me about this, I'm joined by human rights and social justice activist Vanessa, as well as Ian Cameron from Action Society. Ian, Vanessa, good evening. Thank you so much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. Portfolio Committee Chair Tina Joemat-Pettersson on police had harsh words for the Oversight Board after the chairperson failed to arrive at the committee meeting. They were said to come there and answer on what is it that they're going to do to deal with this issue of the backlog in DNA results. Is this where the fault is, the Oversight Board, Ian?
I think it's certainly not the only reason. I'm sure Vanessa will add to what I'm going to say, but I think it's an absolute atrocity that they don't take it serious enough to just turn up. In fact, I must go as far as saying if they have any value whatsoever, I think they can play such an incredibly important role in sorting out the challenges that we see with, for example, the DNA backlog and other challenges in more or less the same context. But it simply seems that they are being paid a lot of money, those of them that get a salary and others that just simply do not take it seriously. It simply means that many thousands of victims are being denied justice and many of murdered victims' families are being denied any form of closure when these horrific things aren't taken seriously by, for example, a board like this.
Vanessa, there is a board tasked with clearing the huge backlog. Since there is somebody who said, you need to do this work, why is the work not being done?
Look, I think there's a culture of lack of sort of interest in their jobs. A lot of these people in very high positions seem to be just there for the money. They're not really there because they care about, the task or all the responsibility that they are actually given. So I don't think there's any sort of repercussions for that kind of attitude, and that has become entrenched, not only with this department, but with a lot of other departments as well. So, as was said previously, their role is so important, and this is just totally unacceptable.
Yeah. At some point, the conversation was around the capacity of the laboratories, or at least we were talking, I think, we only have one laboratory in the country that has capacity to do this work. Is there any work that's being done to better that situation, Vanessa?
I'm not aware of it. But also, we've got to remember, we've got to look back. Unfortunately, we have a bit of a short memory when it comes to fraud and corruption allegations and cases and that. But if you look at the former head of the forensic division, the former police commissioner, he was charged with fraud and corruption. And I believe, according to press reports, that he was probably involved in the collapse of this from a very long time. So, it's not just one issue, it's a lot of issues that are feeding into them, which need to be taken into consideration.
And Ian, what do we need here, as far as capacity is concerned, to be able to reduce this backlog?
Well, I think we haven't seen real adequate improvement in terms of public-private partnerships that were promised. We haven't really seen it being implemented properly or gotten any form of feedback of how it would be done, even though it was promised last year. I think it is important to mention that there is a new DNA lab or forensic lab being constructed at the moment that should, once in working order, assist in stopping or turning around the backlog. But unfortunately, I don't see it happening before August, as we have heard promises from Minister Bekitele before. I think, and I'm going to put it very bluntly, we need a very serious leadership change in terms of political leadership around SAPS. If that doesn't change, we're going to constantly be playing a catch-up game, because I know for a fact that there are still many brilliant career police members working with, for example, forensics and other departments, but in forensics too. And they work under severe pressure with very limited resources, and we need to give them an opportunity in order to be led by competent and adequate leadership.
How much do we know, Ian, about the funding for this particular work? Previously, the minister had blamed the backlog on budget constraints, but also he said the ineffective contract management, adding that a request for additional funding was made in 2019, and from June 2020, electronic tracking as well as tracing grounded to a halt when a dispute arose between IT service providers and the department. Have those issues been sorted out?
According to my knowledge, most of it has not been sorted out. If we consider a system like, for example, the FECAM system, which is crucial in managing certain types of evidence, it hasn't been resolved. In fact, the system has been off for almost 24 months. I'm not sure if Vanessa knows of other systems or other improvements that I might not know of, but unfortunately we haven't seen that. And I think it's crucial to also mention that Bheki Cele himself and the current, almost finished National Commissioner, Kehla Sithole, were all involved in some of the procurement processes for those systems. And it seemed that the disputes came from them in terms of payment, etc. And after a while, the service providers just decided to switch it off because they weren't receiving payment. And obviously that's unfair. So again, we're turning to bad leadership, specifically from the National Commissioner, his team, and obviously the Minister of Police.
Yeah. Vanessa, what do you know about the budget? Has money being allocated, sufficient money for this work? And has the issue around the management of contracts been resolved?
Look, the SEX has one of the biggest budgets, I think, if not the biggest budget, from Treasury. We keep hearing about how there hasn't been enough money allocated. If you look at the breakdown of some of the costs involved in this, there are so many, top management is so heavy now, in fact. There are so many generals who are earning well over 2 million a year. And do we not need to reassess that? Because in my opinion, this kind of thing has been allowed to progress for a very long time, and like we said, it all boils down to political will, which goes back to the head, which is Bheki Cele. So this needs to be changed. The president needs to look at who he's putting in positions. It has a cascading effect on the lives of so many people, particularly the most vulnerable. And this is just a very sad case of exactly how bad things can be when you put people in positions who are totally wrong for them and abuse them. So, the details are actually relevant because nothing really can change until the top management is sorted out. And we have had so much corruption from top management in the police, and there's been very little in the way of prosecutions that I'm aware of to actually deal with this whole mess. This is just part of a bigger quagmire that has become.
How, Vanessa, you're saying this is having an adverse effect broadly, particularly on the most vulnerable. Just outline for us how a failure to collect this DNA, successfully analyzes and successfully interpret what is contained in this DNA actually affects the whole entire criminal justice system.
Yes, it does. And it also undermines communities' trust in the criminal justice system. And it will affect whether people will report rapes in the future. So therefore, it will have an impact on the number of rapes that happen in future if the rapists are not going to be caught, which undermines public perception on whether the police are doing their jobs or not, or whether the justice system is actually working. And I can say for a fact from the people I deal with in a lot of poor communities, there is no trust, there is no belief that even the government is on their side, in matters like this. Often it encourages mob justice. We've had a state of multiple killers and that in KZN. And a lot of that is the communities have become so sick and tired of issues like this not being dealt with. They'll deal with it themselves. So, this is very much a very dangerous and very, very, very shaky situation that we're in these days with the way steps are being run.
Ian, any hope that the backlog would be addressed by 2023?
Unfortunately not. Unfortunately, I'm a bit pessimistic regarding that, and I don't see it changing. I don't see real leadership and intervention from the SAPS management at the moment, and I'm of the opinion that the whole SAPS management needs to have a skill audit done and have to be restructured, and we won't see real change before that. Remember, it's crucial to say that there are literally thousands of new cases coming in every month, and that obviously adds to the further backlog. So it's one thing to consider, the beginning of 2021 where we spoke of 300,000 cases, and it does come down, but then you start considering the amount of cases that are coming in. We can't just ring fence an amount. There's a gradual increase, and if capacity and public-private partnerships doesn't change and isn't improved, I can't see it happening before 2023.
From a civil society point of view, how do we effect accountability here? Because we surely cannot go in, year out, year in, and say, well, the backlog is there, they're supposed to do this is supposed to do that, machines are supposed to be serviced, kits are supposed to be bought, and no one is ever held accountable.
Yeah, from my side, what I can just simply say is that, again, I'm coming back to the leadership issue. If SAPS is not restructured after a detailed skills audit in terms of the South African Police Service management, nothing will change. As Vanessa correctly said, we've got millionaire generals sitting in the South African Police Service, with quite a few of them not having any real police experience, qualification, any form of criminal justice experience, and they're receiving massive salaries without any real results. Today, Action Society asked that the performance evaluation of Becky Tele be made public, and same goes for him. No real experience, and when he was the National Commissioner without any previous experience, he also didn't do a good job. In fact, he was also sacked for corruption, and I know there were details afterwards that came out too, but the point is we need competent professional members in the South African Police Service, and if that doesn't change, it doesn't help us just putting plasters on small grazes and cuts. We literally need to get to the root cause and start rebuilding the South African Police Service as a professional one.
That's human rights and social justice activist Vanessa Berg, as well as Ian Cameron from Action Society.